Robert Harding, the Citizens Political Reporter. I'm joined by Jim Barber, Democratic candidate for state Senate in the 51st District, which, thanks to Jim, is right behind him, as you can see in the shot there. So if you need an idea of how big of a swath of upstate New York it is, there's your image right there. Jim, thanks so much for joining me.
Well, you can't even see Ulster County.
So. That's right. So let's start with the first question I'm sure you're asked. I know I've asked you this question before, but for the video audience, why did you decide to run for state Senate?
Yeah, I actually decided last summer. So it's been over a year that I've decided to run for this race, and it was when they're passing a lot of legislation at the end of the year. I realized that rural upstate New York had very little representation inside the Democratic majority in the state Senate, which was now, they're firmly in charge. And there are no farmers in the state Senate. So they're passing legislation that really impacts upstate New York farms without us having good representation there in the majority at the table where the decisions are being made. And I knew, being a farmer, business owner in this rural district, I had a very good background to bring to the table and to represent very wide swaths of this electorate. So I decided to run to be that voice for rural upstate New York and farms in the state Senate. And hopefully I'll get there.
Great. So an issue that I know is important in this district and in many parts of this district, we were talking a little bit about it before we went live, is broadband. And I know that there have been different federal and state initiatives to try and expand broadband access, especially in rural areas. This is the 51st. Although it's outside of where I am right now, it does extend into Keuka County and includes many rural counties. So, in terms of broadband, what from the state standpoint of things needs to be done to expand access, especially in these rural areas?
Right. Well, there are a couple of things. We gave a lot of incentives and kind of territorial rights to large companies to provide that broadband access, universal access, but the metrics used to determine when they've met their criteria are far too lax. I think it's like one house in a zip code. So clearly the metrics we use to say, you guys have done your job are wrong. So we need to, ensure that those companies are held accountable for providing what they actually agreed to provide, which was universal access to every home. We can also address the fact that the only utility that is taxed inside the DOT right-of-way is broadband cable. So at one point, we're trying to incentivize spreading it out to more and more rural areas. At the same time, we really hinder that prospect by taxing it per mile. So we need to have a policy that's at least cohesive and really understands what it is we're trying to achieve. And as you see with the COVID crisis, access to broadband has clearly demonstrated how important it is for uniform opportunities. Students who have broadband access are competing or trying to learn at the same level with folks who don't have it, vice versa. But anyway, so education is hampered. You can't work from home. A lot of people trying to work from home, do their businesses from home, Zoom meetings. If you don't have broadband access, you're not able to really engage in that operation. Plus businesses, we're trying to operate in a era where we're trying to reduce the amount of in-person contact, which, the more remotely you can do that, the better. But if your business doesn't have access to broadband, you're just left out of the, basically the future of commerce here. So a lot of reasons, having universal access to broadband will certainly give rural New York a more competitive chance in the world. Plus, cell service. I can't drive across my district, make any kind of, long conversation with anyone because every few miles you run out of service. So, it's real, it's a problem. So.
Given your background as in farming and agriculture generally, I know that you've held some different posts in at the federal and state levels focused on agriculture. But what do you think you can bring? I know that you've talked often about having, if you're elected, being the only farmer in the state Senate. What do you think you can bring in that regard to affect change, with agriculture policy and things related to farms, as businesses go, if you're elected to the state Senate?
Right. So specifically at the farm level, what we really need to do is help our New York State farms to be competitive with both, national and international markets, and to have enough income to be, a viable operation. And we keep losing, farmers. The land kind of tends to like conglomerate, but we lose the numbers of farmers because it is so difficult to survive. And sometimes, the smaller ones are at, struggle more unless they're doing like direct marketing, where they can really have more control over their prices. So there are a number, I try to focus on issues or incentives that will help broad sections of the agriculture industry. So being able to really create a more cohesive food shed within New York State and the Northeast, which requires kind of investments in mid-level processing and distribution, also communication, getting product from the farms to the markets where they're needed. We can also do more in terms of partnering with farms in addressing things like climate change and environmental issues. There's a program called, it's a study, it's a proposal called Payments for Environmental Benefits, which really focuses on the good environmental work that farms can do. And we know that farms are very good for a lot of environmental issues. And I'll point out specifically the New York City watershed. New York City has the cleanest unfiltered water, probably any large metropolitan area in the country, in the world. And it comes from well-managed farmland upstate. And the New York City folks, they recognize this, so they have put into, they invested a lot in helping farmers install certain practices to make sure, that they can farm successfully and well-managed land so that, it's a tremendous watershed for New York City. And that was all done so that they would not have to filter their water system. Very successful program. It's studied worldwide. People come from all over the world to look at the model set up by the New York City watershed. Let's take that a couple steps further. One, we can implement that same model across every watershed, but also, let's not stop at helping the farmer put in a buffer strip or a stream crossing. Let's pay them for doing good practices, zone tilling, cover cropping, minimum till, silviculture, things that sequester more carbon and build more nutrient soils, nutrient-rich soils. All those practices that have environmental benefit help the entire community. So if everyone is benefiting from it, let's everyone like chip in and help farms survive, thrive financially so that they can be there to provide this tremendous environmental benefit. So, that's kind of a new thinking on that approach. Rather than like making farms do certain things, let's pay them for doing them. They're the stewards on the land. Let's help them survive. The biggest thing I'm working on right now to help not only farms, but all of upstate New York is fixing the tax system in the state. We have the highest property taxes in the country because New York State is the only state that makes counties pay for Medicaid, plus some other unfunded mandates pushed down on the county levels. And at the county level, most of the revenue is generated through property taxes, which are, of course, the most regressive tax there is, completely unrelated to how much you earn, what your income is. If your business has been closed down for 4 months because of the COVID, your property taxes are the same, not related to income. Same thing if you've been out of work, unrelated to income, property taxes are the same. Not even related to how much services you use. It's a crazy system. We have an opportunity now to fix it. We can tap into the tremendous economic activity going on in the financial district in Wall Street in New York City, much of which goes untaxed, taxed at a much lower rate than you and I pay through our paychecks. They have gimmicks and loopholes that let them avoid the taxes you and I pay. And you hear them say it all the time. Warren Buffett says it all the time. He pays a lower percentage of his income in taxes than the secretary. This is a crazy system. Why are we, the working folks on the ground, homeowners, retirees, people trying to raise a family, trying to run a small business in New York, why are we shouldering this burden that's a state program? We can change this system. In Schoharie County, 80% of our county budget is unfunded mandates from the state. They're state programs. Well, if you can take 80% of your county budget and hand that off to the state, first you can dramatically lower your income, your property taxes, so that you can afford to raise a family here, run a business here, farm here, retire here. And if farms can now, or businesses and farms can now compete better with folks from across the country and across the globe, we can actually have viable, sustainable, generational farms. I'm fortunate; I have a 5th generation farm. It's a tough slog for folks. So we need to make sure, let's fix the system for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Something I wanted to follow up on is, I'm sure you're aware at this point. I know that you visited Emerson Park and Owasco Lake last week, and there's real concerns about water quality due to harmful algal blooms. Owasco Lake is the main water source for, among other municipalities, the city of Auburn, and it happens to be in your district. So, with that, I know one thing over the years in the citizen covering this has been, what role should farms play? There's concerns. I know that, agricultural runoff might be contributing to the problem. And I know that, by and large, there's been a lot of conversations about what role, farms could play in helping address water quality. Obviously, there's other factors that go into it as well, but farms are just one piece. But I wondered, given your obvious experience on this, and certainly you've put a focus on the environment during your campaign. Where do you find the balance there with ensuring that farms can maintain, stay in business, but also be good environmental stewards as well?
And so that's exactly what I was talking about a few minutes ago. So, farms are struggling just to survive in the state. And we need agriculture in the state. It's a huge economic, driver, especially in rural areas, and probably the 2nd largest industry in the state. So we need agriculture. We need them to survive. We need them to be profitable. So, and we need, these clean watersheds and other environmental benefits. So we can help farms, install those practices, the buffer strips, and then, like, as they say, these good practices, zone tilling, cover cropping, those all have certain values. Let's, for every acre, every year, farmers doing those practices, we give him, some sort of compensation so that he can stay in business and continue doing those. So, and it's been proven in the New York City watershed. I know farms get the blame, but as I said, the New York City watershed is the largest unfiltered, best water system in the world. And there's a lot of agriculture there. So they figured out well-managed farms are a good, probably the best land use in a watershed. So let's help the farms, help all of us. It needs to be a partnership. If we just keep pointing the finger at someone and saying, you need to fix this, it's not going to work. And I'm not convinced it's all, I think it's clearly not just the farm activity. There's a lot of residential activity and other things going on around the lakes and in the watershed. So I think there's a lot we can do, but again, it needs to be, there needs to be a partnership, a way that we can all move forward together with this.
I know that you just mentioned taxes, the state tax system a short while ago. Did want to ask you about something that I think taxes certainly falls under, but the business climate in New York certainly. I'm sure that as on your farm you've been affected by this different policies, but I wonder what you think the state needs to do to improve the business climate for farms and small businesses and so on to not only open here but thrive and stay here well into the future.
Right. So clearly, lessening the tax burden, because as I say, property taxes are the highest in New York of almost anywhere, is a huge step toward that and helps businesses universally. I think we do need to every agency needs to look at the regulations they impose on all levels of business to, which ones are really necessary, which ones are duplicative, which ones are not achieving what they need to achieve. We really need to examine, what is the goal of every regulation? Are we achieving that? Is it like having some other effect that, perhaps whether intended or not, is not moving all of us forward at the same time. And we need, businesses need, a good, workforce, educated workforce, and other infrastructure, the broadband and things that really help businesses to survive. They need educated workforce, and those people you need. So you also need an upstate area where folks can afford to live, raise a family, move into, that will provide the services those people want: good health care, good education. And again, healthcare and education is tied back to the property tax issue, because we're struggling upstate New York to keep our healthcare facilities functioning and keeping our schools functioning. The state, with that a substantial revenue stream to take over the Medicaid cost and increase the reimbursement rates so that they actually fund the hospitals for the care they're giving. We've seen again during the COVID crisis, hospitals are needing to lay off staff during a pandemic because providing the basic health care doesn't pay the bills. They make money on elective procedures. This is crazy. We need a system that actually adequately reimburses our healthcare facilities so we can have good healthcare and providers in upstate New York. I have 2 counties in my district with no maternity wards. So this is how, makes it difficult to attract the workforce you need when you can't provide basic services like that. And our education is basically, the quality of education for in the primary and school is tied largely to what zip code you're in, how much wealth is in your community, rather than let's have a system that provides everyone the same educational opportunity.
I wanted to shift to public safety and get your thoughts on the state bail reform law. This was passed as part of the budget last year. I'm sure that you know about it, but for those watching, this was part of the budget last year. The goal was to eliminate cash bail for most misdemeanor and nonviolent felonies, but there has been criticism of this since the law took effect in January, because there have been some offenses that people have pinpointed that there wasn't cash bail applied, and people got out and either committed more crimes, or there was just outrage about the crime that they were let out for. So wanted to get your thoughts on that and how you would approach that as a policy. What, if any, changes you think that need to be made to it, and I guess how you go from here with criminal justice reforms.
Where to start on this? So first of all, it was passed not to eliminate bail. That wasn't the problem. The problem was, for the same offense, two people would have different outcomes. One could afford bail and go back home and go to work. The other could not afford bail, would remain in jail, still not convicted of any crime, but couldn't afford bail. So he's in the jail system, which also is expensive for society to maintain. So it's trying to give people, it was trying to level that playing field, but it gave no discretion to any other segment of the judicial and law enforcement system to actually understand those individual circumstances. And it was a law that was written with not enough input from law enforcement and judicial authorities. I've spent quite a bit of time during the campaign talking to sheriffs and law enforcement and judges to get their impression or their ideas, like how is this impacting everyone. It's also in many cases adversely impacting some of the people it was intended to help, because they're not getting the other help they need that can be provided through the judicial and system. So mental health and drug addiction treatments. So it really needs to be looked at with everyone at the table, everyone at the table to decide, like, where do we need to fix this? Because the reality is, the people on the force, especially on the ground, especially in rural areas, they are pretty in tune to the communities and the folks that they're dealing with. And I was talking to one sheriff. He said, someone they had to keep releasing. Well, after he commits 3 or 4 crimes, now you're at the felony level. So you're not helping that person by letting them out for a smaller crime, because I guess once they accumulate, now you're at a higher level, and you're in a worse position than you would have been before. So definitely needs to be looked at. I understand the issue was trying to correct, but it needs to be definitely needs some changes. Let's get everyone in the room together. All legislation should be like that. Too often lawmakers think they know what the best thing to do without getting input from everyone. And the reality is that the situations in densely urban areas are much different than they are in probably any sector of my district, because it's so rural. So we have a very rural area, small communities. Our circumstances are much different. So we create these one-size-fits-all laws that don't really work in every situation. So it needs to be looked at again.
What's your opinion of the state's economic development initiatives? I know that Governor Cuomo created the Regional Economic Development Councils. A lot of this activity has kind of been born out of that process, but there's obviously billions of dollars that have been invested in different economic development projects over the years, over the last decade, really. What's your thought on these programs? How should we approach economic development as a state?
Well, I would really prefer, so that system is really the state collecting everyone's tax money, and then some companies applying for it. So if you have good grant writers, you get this money. It should not be a process where the state level authority are making decisions about who's going to be a successful business and who's not. Let's make the business climate good for everyone in the state. You know, again, you lower their taxes by 80%, your property taxes, reduce some of the burdensome regulations and stuff, make it a climate where companies can actually survive on their own. When we want to encourage a new company to come into the state, the first thing we do is give them a 10-year break on their property taxes. So we've identified what the problem is. Let's do something about it for everyone, not just the ones we choose to give that, give that break to. I think, there certainly are places where, state economic development programs can help get folks started, and especially, young startup companies can use some assistance, but, to use this as our model for like economic growth statewide, let's just make it so every business that already is here and existing can do well, and make it a climate where like anyone can really get started in business without needing to apply to the powers to be at the state to make those decisions on who gets the funding and who has to go it on their own. Because if you don't get the grant, you're still going to get business, but now you're competing against someone who got the grant. So it's a crazy system. Let's just make it a climate where we can all move forward.
I know that one of the problems that has plagued Albany, the state legislature over the years is public corruption. There have been some steps taken to address this over the years, but I know that there's many people, some of your fellow candidates for sure, who think that more needs to be done in this area. So, in terms of that, what more do you think needs to be done to address corruption? Any corruption that arises in state government.
Yeah, well, money in politics is can be a very corrupting influence. And if you're sitting on the insurance committee, should you really be taking money from the insurance companies to fund your campaigns? I mean, that in itself is a very simple example of, we need to get away from that type of process. Now, is it a matter of like, just get all that kind of money out of campaigns so that they're affordable for everyone? We really need to eliminate big money, big donors in campaigns, because it's just, it's too easy of a road, to go down for candidates. And again, some of these economic development zones and policies we've seen, where those run into problem with money is a tempting influence for a lot of people. So, let's get to a system where we can all like succeed on our own without needing that that largesse from the state to help us get over all the hurdles. We can do it. Just lower those hurdles, and we can move forward on our own. But I think money in politics and look at, so here's another influence. Look at this district. That's drawn to keep politicians in office, not to represent anybody in that area. If you tried to represent the voters, would you draw something like that? No, so why do we keep doing these things? And politicians will hand you back your taxpayer money to fund some project in your district, and then we put their name on the plaque because they gave us our money back. I'm going to fight very hard to get help our firehouses and volunteer services and libraries, but don't ever put my name on a plaque. It's not my money. You got people in your community who've worked very hard and served your community. Put their name on the plaque. It's your money, not the politicians. That just drives me nuts when that happens. And I guess I also wanted to mention, again, back to the tax proposal, because I think this is a huge possibility for upstate New York. When you take all that unfunded mandates off the counties, and I think in Cortland County, $11 million just for Medicaid. So you take that off the backs of those counties, you now have funds you can invest in first responders, in law enforcement, in the things in drug treatment. We have tremendous opioid crisis in upstate New York. We can do things at the county level to help our communities move forward and make it a place where people can live. So let's do that. Let's stop, right now we're in a system where we're trying to fund state programs, and with that they put a cap on the property taxes, so we can't actually raise the funds we need to keep the thing going. So we need to fix that. And on the personal example, I kind of getting back and forth here on the corruption, the money influence in politics. So a couple of weeks ago, a dark money PAC funded negative false attack ads against me. They picked only 6 races in all of upstate New York. I was one of them because apparently they don't like my tax plan, because the billionaires funding that PAC are pretty happy with the tax system the way it is now. So, why do we allow, those dark money PACs, those outside influence to try to determine outcome of elections here in upstate New York? Just because they want to keep a farmer out of the state Senate and keep their unearned income in their pockets. Unearned income is taxed less than earned income for some reason. I don't know why.
In terms of money in politics, what types of changes specifically do you want to see, in terms of campaign finance? I know that there's public financing of elections that's come up before. I guess what changes would you like to see to achieve that?
Well, I guess first of all, you keep the dark money and that PACs and those outside, make those folks not a legal way to run campaigns. So, it's up to the candidate. This being my first campaign, I don't have a ton of experience as to how this all rolls out. But again, the advantage always goes to the incumbent. When you have an incumbent sitting on the insurance committee and then taking money from insurance companies, that should simply not happen. I mean, that should not be the way things work in a fair political system. So if you're going to make decisions impacting a certain segment of business or folks, then you don't take money from them. But this is my first go at a real election, so I'm not sure. I have like 1,500 individual donations. I'm trying to build a broad base of small donors. I don't know what it's like to have get all your money from 6 donors.
Yeah. I did want to ask you about that because certainly your campaign is well financed, but financed by largely individual donors, and certainly not everything's based on money in campaigns, but it certainly does help make you competitive and fund things that can help get your message out there. So, how do you think you're positioned in this race? As a Democrat, you pointed to the map behind you. You look at the enrollment numbers, and Republicans do have the enrollment advantage in this district, at least in terms of the head-to-head R versus D. So, a lot of the messages that you're saying, certainly could appeal to Republicans as well. So, how competitive do you think this district is, and how winnable do you think it is for a Democrat like yourself?
Well, I would not have gotten in the race last summer against Jim Seward when he was still in the race if I didn't think it was winnable. The issues in upstate New York are not Democrat or Republican. They're upstate issues. Tax issues, healthcare, education, tax reform. These are issues the entire upstate community needs and wants. The question is, I got in this race because I knew I could be in the room with the Senate majority at the table discussing the future of New York, explaining to them what agriculture is like, all the impacts of what's going on, what it's like to live in rural upstate New York. They're surprised we don't all have access to broadband. So just being able to be at that table discussing these things, and better than a lobbyist, you build relationships with people in the Senate. And when you build relationships, you build trust, and that's what really required to get your voice heard and sit down with the folks who are the groups making these decisions, provide the proposals, get the things out there, and explain really how helping upstate New York will help them, I shouldn't say them, that will help urban areas, because they're getting the water sources from upstate New York. They're very concerned about access to nutrition. They like having fresh, nutritious food in their schools, and the state is very focused on the farm to school program, which incidentally is a program that I helped start. We formed an organization back in the mid-90s with a very diverse group of people. So this story actually impacts or touches on just what we're talking about. We had groups of people who were openly in opposition to each other in this little organization we formed called New York Farms. Where we said, let's focus on the issues we all agree on, which basically was farming, and figure out how we help farms survive. What can we do? We're very focused on buy local. It's kind of the start of the buy local program. All that, all the money you spend locally recirculates. But also, we came up with the farm to school program, the very first one in the entire country. The entire farm to school program in the nation started in Cortland County, the New York State Grange, a little organization called New York Farms. So being able to get people together, focus on your common interest, and move forward to making that happen. So yeah, I have a history of figuring out how to help people, come together and work on our what we agree on. I don't know if I answered all the questions. I kind of got sidetracked there.
I think that was an answer. Yep. Last question for you. What will motivate you in this job? Certainly it's a big responsibility, and in your case, you have quite a big area to cover with several counties there. Stretching from central New York and the Finger Lakes through the Mohawk Valley, southern tier, Hudson Valley. So, what will drive you if you're elected to the state senate to do this job on a daily basis?
Just doing good work. I mean, it's what I don't know. I don't even know how to answer that. I mean, that's what I've done my whole life. I mean, worked 80, 100 hours a week, just doing the work that needs to be done. My motivation is trying to do a good job. When I worked for the USDA, I worked 8 years for the USDA, ran the New York Farm Service Agency. That job was in Syracuse, New York. So 5 days a week, I left my wife, my home, my farm to go do this job, which the taxpayers were paying me to do, but it's a job where I could actually have tremendous impact for my agricultural community in New York State. And a lot of the federal farm programs do not really focus on the type of agriculture we have here in New York State. We have very diversified agriculture. We have fruit, vegetables, dairy. Federal programs are very focused on row crops, grain, corn, wheat, stuff like that. So being able to work within the system to make changes that actually benefit New York was a tremendous motivational factor to me. And we were actually quite successful. A couple of times I had to confront the Secretary of Agriculture, Secretary Vilsack, and that was uncomfortable, but just kind of explaining, and making my point of like why New York was different and why the programs that might work for a grain farm really need to be adapted to help someone growing lettuce and tomatoes and apples. So I was successful. I mean, we got some important changes done, and a huge one in what was called the Farm Storage Facility Loan Program, which is generally for grain bins. But when we got done with it, it helped bulk tanks, coolers, vegetable washers, refrigerated trucks, cheese aging sheds. I mean, we expanded it to help basically every kind of agriculture we had here in New York State. That took a lot of work, but it's a matter of getting in there, making your case, getting everyone to understand why it's important to do this, and then finding areas where other people can benefit from the programs that you're promoting. And we did it. We got some amazing stuff done. But my motivation is just trying to make things better, get things done.
Jim Barber.
What I've done my whole life. So.
Yeah. Well, farming's definitely not a 40-hour-a-week job, right? So, certainly that work ethic is there. Certainly in all the farmers and farming families I know, that work ethic I think comes naturally. So, Jim Barber, Democratic candidate for state Senate in the 51st district. Early voting begins October 24th, runs through November 1st. Election day is November 3rd. You can vote by absentee ballot as well. I know that process is underway, and many people, I know thousands of people in Central New York have already voted by absentee. So those are the ways you can vote. And again, Jim, thanks so much for joining me this evening.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and it's been great. I don't know. It's weird because I'm not really getting any really feedback from the everyone who might be watching this right now. So it's been very interesting. But I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much. I can do this every other day if you want. So.
Well, I'd love to do it every other day. So,
I probably can't.
Don't tempt me. You'll get invites every other day. No. But yeah, thanks so much again, and to everybody out there, thanks so much for watching. And we'll have more of these with different candidates in different races leading up to Election Day. So, thanks so much for watching, and have a good night.
Thank you.